welcome to episode, I think it's 7 or maybe 8. No, episode 8 of season 3. I've officially lost count because I've done so many of these, but it's another episode, so yes, it's episode 8. Joining me today is Benjamin Falbo.
Falbo.
Right. Falbo. Okay, I was off by a couple of syllables. Benjamin is a filmmaker.
Falbo.
Falbo. Benjamin is a filmmaker living in New York City. He's also connected to the previous episode I just did with Stephanie Chateau, who works. They're basically within the same company of Catalyst Wrestling, so it's odd how these two episodes are literally joined by connection, which I did not plan out, but it just happened to be by circumstance.
Sometimes things just work out that way, sometimes they do.
Benjamin, how did you get into filmmaking? Did you go to, were you always, is it a long story or is it a fun story?
It's an interesting story. So it's a lot of different things. I don't think I've ever had the opportunity to give this story before. So this is going to be a very sloppy run of the story because even I might mess some things up, but here we go. So I didn't always want to be a filmmaker. I always wanted to be an animator. I always wanted to be a cartoonist when I was a kid. And I love to draw monsters and wrestling characters. I got into professional wrestling when I was like when I was like 10 or 12. And that those two loves kind of fed into each other. But I always loved movies. I always loved cinema. My dad and my mom, a lot of uncles and grandpas always took me to the movies when I was a kid, showed me classics, showed me films I was probably way too young for. I was watching Terminator and RoboCop and King Kong and all these films.
My kind of movie. Mm-hmm. Wait, when you say King Kong, do you mean King Kong?
The original King Kong. The original. Okay,
because until the Peter Jackson movie, there was two King Kongs. There was the Jeff Bridges King Kong, and then it was Rick Baker playing King Kong essentially, and then you had the original King Kong. So I was like, you gotta mix. And also there's King Kong Lives, where it's like,
oh god, King Kong Lives is one of the biggest pieces of shit you'll ever watch.
My brother will disagree on that. Okay.
Oh god, it's not Jessica Lange's finest hour. Even she calls it a piece of crap. But now back to it. My biggest influence in terms of my filmmaking obsession, my love of it, was a guy named James Rolfe who runs a website called cinemassacre.com. And he's also the Angry Video Game Nerd on YouTube. And that was what got me into him originally, the Angry Video Game Nerd. He would play this crazy nerd man-child character who would destroy old video games in the 1980s and 90s, insult them. And he'd make them short films, the effects, he'd have horror characters in them. And that's what really kicked off my feeling of, wow, you can just pick up a camera and do this. And he did this whole documentary on his channel called Cinemassacre 200. He outlined how he got into filmmaking, and it's such an inspirational piece of work for me. And it's a documentary about his own life, and that kind of segues into my documentary work, which is a different thing into of itself. But filmmaking alongside art and animation became one of my main driving forces for a lot of my middle school into high school and early college years. And the whole documentary thing came about very recently for me, at least only last year really, because at the end of in college, I got into this guy on YouTube named Kenny Johnson. He makes these incredibly great, sometimes very short, sometimes a little bit long, wrestling documentaries about guys like Joey Janela and Adam Cole, Sami Callihan and Eddie Kingston and Maria Manick and Kimberly, and he'd make these really great short documentaries. He did a lot of work for Evolve back when they were still operating. But this guy's work is sick, and I was like, wow, this is really good. And I loved doing that. And about the same time, I was doing a wrestling podcast with my friends Ray Raimundo, Raymond Sanchez, and my friend Michael Sarantino. It's called the General Admission Wrestling Podcast. And I'd really gotten into interviewing wrestlers because wrestlers are some of the most fascinating human beings in the world.
They are.
And for one of my, I had to take an elective in college, and that ended up having to be an intro to editing course. And I was like, I like to edit. I'm doing it a lot more lately. But so I wanted to learn how to do it better. So I took this class with a professor who I liked, even though I'm pretty sure she hated me because I was weird. I did horror shit. I did like wrestling related things. She didn't really fucking get it, but hey, whatever. She kicked me in the ass to be better, and I owe that woman a dinner, so I'll also say that. But what happens is my first film I made was, and you can't find this anywhere because it's, at my own admission, I think it's charming, but it is not my best work, but it was a first step for me. It was called Zero Dimes and Sweaty Tights, and I interviewed 3 New York professional wrestlers, and I got their stories, one of which was Smiley the Psycho Luchador, which he's a very good friend of mine, and got to tell his story. Just wrestlers saying, why do you do what you do, despite the fact that there's very little money to be made here unless you're on a very professional level.
Yeah.
And I put it out in class, and my class got a nice chortle out of it, and they had fun with it. I got critiqued by my teacher for some of the more technical aspects of it, but I was still proud of it. And I moved on from that to the next year. I did another one, which I consider to be much better, called Why Do You Bump? And it follows Bobby Orlando, the Memphis Mofo, Jimmy Rave, Corinne Mink, Juba, and a whole lot of other really great New York indie talent. And I interviewed a bunch of them, got some good B-roll because I was working for Catalyst, then known as Capital Wrestling. So I had a lot of opportunities to just speak with people right in the room. And that got a better response. And so for my final year, this is one of the main ones that really kind of took me forward. I decided to do a documentary focusing on one wrestler who originated in Pittsburgh. He's now doing a lot of stuff here in New York and New Jersey. His name's MV Young. And I'd worked with him through a show. He had been with us at Capitol for some time. Then he had departed, and he was doing his own thing around the scene. I was like, wow, this guy's really picking up on popularity and he has a really interesting story to tell. So I said, hey, would you like to be the subject for my school project? And we filmed an interview, and I followed him around for like 2 shows, and I got a bunch of footage of him. And because he was doing this big event with Drags and Drop Kicks, which is the wrestling extension of the Uncanny Attractions company. And we did this big show at the House of Yes.
Now, when you're doing footage at a wrestling event and you're getting him, backstage, getting ready, all that stuff, do you still have to be mindful of the wrestlers who don't want to be on camera? So they'll be like,
that is an excellent question.
Yeah.
No, that is an excellent question. So that's, that is a big part of it. Yeah. I agree. When it comes to that, I very much, when people see a guy walking around with a camera in the back, I usually make it known to the people in the vicinity that I'm filming, and I'm like, hey, if you want to kayfabe your gimmick or you don't want anything seen, I'm not going to name names specifically, but like if you're uncomfortable with that, just I'll aim the camera away for you, or I'll edit around you. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But no, the people at the House of Yes were very cool. The crew at Uncanny Attractions, backstage at Catalyst Wrestling, backstage are very okay with me letting me roam free with the camera because they know I'm not going to do anything with it. But so I finished I Am MV Young, and that got a great response from my class. Teacher probably didn't make heads or tails of it again, but I was very proud of it. And that led to one of my more recent ones, which I'm still very proud of. It's called One Above All, Anthony Gangone. It's about Anthony Gangone, another New York professional wrestler who I feel is one of the foremost talents here in New York City and New Jersey. And he's great in the ring, wonderful storyteller. Wonderful human being. He hosts another really great podcast called the Chill and Killin' Podcast, where he talks about horror films. And he had a very dark but inspiring story about I won't sum it up here because I'll encourage you to watch the movie because I can't really do justice to his story, but a attempt at taking his own life and kind of what it taught him about, maybe just what it told him about his own mental health, where he stood in the world, and like what he needed to do to get better. And it ends on a very empowering note of like overcoming the pitfalls of your mental health and like really trying to make art and do something positive and give back to the world and achieving your dreams. And like, I dedicate this whole sequence to just uncut, no cuts of just him telling the story. And I've shown it to people who have legitimately gotten teary-eyed watching it. And that was a real moment for me where I'm like, oh my God, I was able to capture footage of a legitimately emotional resonant moment from a real human being and edit it, not even do too much to it, just do a little color correction, just frame it a certain way. And I was able to get an emotional response from people. And that's what really started letting me know, oh, I could actually do this. I could actually build a portfolio on this, like
Yeah.
expand in other things. Because one of my main goals going forward is to do maybe a few more fictional shorts, but the whole documentary thing is just, first, it's a very good format to work with. You do an interview, you get a lot of B-roll to tell a story. You're essentially making a movie backwards in a way. You get everything, then you write a script, then you edit it. You're essentially doing it in a way backwards, but it's a great format to work with. I will admit the formatting part really got away from me on the rise and fall of Blackcraft wrestling, but we'll touch on that
in a little while.
Yes.
But yeah, speaking of documentaries, my college, even though I was a film minor, my college actually, Brooklyn College, has, I believe, 4 different like tracks to do in film production. You got film production, you got cinematography. Those who just want to do like cinematography, that sort of thing. Screenwriting, and you have documentaries. Because people who do documentaries have a lot more of a harder time because of, getting stuff done. Well, I would say the people who do the documentaries and the people who do the cinematography have much more of a hard time because of equipment and that sort of thing. I remember having a class last year. It was my screenwriting class, and one of my classmates, she said she was doing a documentary for her, her documentary class, but her subject was in San Francisco, so she has stationed some time to go to San Francisco to talk to her and then come back. And so she timed it during spring break, since, spring break is literally like maybe a week and a half of just like freedom from college and stuff like that. But yeah, the documentary scene, it is interesting because it's odd because like up to like maybe a few years ago, there wasn't that many wrestling documentaries that were coming out. There were like some little stuff, but not a whole lot. There was like the big wrestling documentary that was out for the past 20 years was Beyond the Mat, but that was like a big, that was just like an inside look of, WWE and, all pro wrestling. But then over the course of, say, 10 years or so, in 2010, going into like maybe 2015, I know Sick Nick Mondo has his own has at least 2 documentaries. One of them was actually about his life in CCW, that sort of thing too. And I had to still watch that one. I think it's called The Trade. And yeah, it's odd because up to like maybe 2016, 17, like more and more wrestling documentaries actually were coming out of the woodwork. So I found that actually quite interesting, like looking into it, because as I said, the only big wrestling documentaries were like, Beyond the Mat, and that was only, you
did mention Beyond the Mat, and that did play a big role in what I've been doing lately. And you mentioned like the Andre the Giant documentary that HBO put out, Dark Side of the Ring, I think has brought it back into the mainstream big time.
I think that's one of us. Yeah, that's one of the main like resurgence to like wrestling documentaries, because Dark Side of the Ring, because even though it is an episodic TV show, it's still doing like a mini documentary each episode about certain things about dark aspects of wrestling, like the Bruce Brody murder, Owen Hart thing, and then they keep going and they said they even got wrestling. People think, oh, wrestling is just all people just punching, all that stuff. There is a dark side of wrestling, and like, it's heartbreaking and sad, but it's also amazing to know like what type of stuff is happening behind the scenes, who's collecting what heads, that sort of thing too. So it's like the old saying, there's like too many cooks in the kitchen.
Too many.
Yeah. But
spoils the broth.
Yeah. But yeah, in terms of your documentaries, Was it always pertaining to wrestling, or did you want to do other documentaries around New York City? Because, it's like, New York City, it's a pretty much like a city of adventure almost sometimes, especially, well, New York City and New Jersey are like cities of adventure, states of adventure.
Funny, I am expanding out of wrestling. Wrestling plays a role in another project that I'm timetabling for sometime in October and November to be determined, but I have like 99% of the footage filmed for it. And it is going to be titled The Jersey Devils Reject Zach Amico. It is a documentary dedicated to a local comedian, deathmatch wrestler, manager, podcaster, trauma film actor named Zach Amico, who's an insane human being that I can't believe I share a reality with. And I saw this dude and I'm like, this dude needs a documentary. And I filmed this great sit-down interview with him recently, and he is New Jersey royalty in that his grandfather was the mayor of Secaucus, New Jersey, where he grew up.
Wow.
Paul Amico.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so he has this whole he is a collaborator with us over at Catalyst Wrestling, and he is. Much like Stephanie Satili plays Portia Vaughn, they're her evil #feminist character. He plays the Jersey Devils Deacon and the leader of the Hudson County Horror Show with the Meadowlands Monster, Lou Bruno, Twitch Lucas. He's an amazing up and coming wrestler. Joshua Cutshall, Michael Zamaido, like all these. There's a carnival freak show of weird people. And no, that'll be a part of the flick for sure. And so the Jersey Devils Deacon Zach Amico will be coming out soon, which will be including a special several talking segments and an introduction from none other than Trauma co-founder Lloyd Kaufman. So he's in the movie.
Uncle Lloyd.
Uncle Lloyd, baby, yes, and he is exactly how you'd imagine him to be in real life. He's a wonderful. Can I tell the Lloyd Kaufman story for like 2 minutes? Can I tell the Lloyd Kaufman story?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to hear the rest of your questions in a minute because they're actually enthralling. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. So,
I was actually going to bring up if you actually happen to work with Trauma, because I know Trauma is a big part of both New Jersey and New York.
I'll handle this. I'll handle that question too. I'll two-part these together. So, Trauma has been a part of my life since I was like a kid. Wait, again, more movies I should probably not have been watching, but I saw Toxic Avenger Part 2 when I was when I was a kid, even though I was not allowed to, but had a ball with it. I started going to horror conventions very early in my life and had a blast at them when I was a kid. And I met Lloyd Kaufman when I was like 13 or 14, and he told jokes, and he seemed like an old man on LSD, and he was fantastic, and I loved him. And I love Trauma, Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead, Terra Firma, Romeo and Juliet, The Toxic Avenger, Class of Nukem High, Surf Nazis Must Die, like Mother's Day, Monster in the Closet, like all these just insanely campy, amazing films, blood-sucking freaks, just disturbing, gross, horribly offensive, non-politically correct films that are just chef kiss perfect. And so I knew that Zach had done a lot of work with Trauma, and I was like, as a joke, because this, to quote another one of my idols, is Kevin Smith, and one of his defining quotes is, "This part of my career is predicated upon pushing whimsy. Just kind of how far can I push this?" And I always hung on to that because I was like, just push it till you can't anymore. And so I thought to myself, Zach has an in with Trauma. I'm sure I could maybe get a word in. So I got Lloyd's email. I got Lloyd's assistant's email. No, I got Lloyd's email. And I wrote a very nice email where I just wrote, "Dear Mr. Kaufman, longtime Trauma fan, I'm producing this documentary. I know Zach plays a big role behind the scenes and on camera for both the Return to Nukem High movies and Shakespeare Shitstorm, #Shakespeare Shitstorm. And I was wondering if you would like to be a talking head for the documentary, if you'd like to do an intro." And I sent him an email, and I did not expect to ever hear back from him. And then 20 minutes later, I get an email where he's like, "I love Zach. I'd love to. Here's my assistant's email." And I was like, oh my God. So I get his assistant's email. We set a date. First date doesn't work out. I'm broke. My heart's broken. I call them back. I'm like, "Hey, can we go for another day?" They say totally. I get back in studio. I literally, and I could not have timed this any better because this was in like mid-February. So if I had been just like a month or so off, this would not have happened because of all the stuff that's been going on.
Yes.
So this was a miracle if there ever was one. So I went to Troma Studios in Long Island City. I got to meet the man himself. I got to see their offices. It's an amazing environment, like very, very kind of, it's both high energy and low energy at the same time because I'm like, Lloyd's got a flight for this time. Lloyd's got to do this. Lloyd's coming in, and Lloyd comes in and he's wearing like a Yale sweatshirt and he's got like some Skechers on, I think, like some old man shoes. It's wonderful. Like, and he's like some New Balances, I think.
That's an amazing visual.
Yeah, it is an amazing visual, and he's a great talker. We had wonderful conversations off camera about the state of modern horror, all of the things we liked, we didn't like, and then I get him on camera. And my only regret is we had to keep it questions solely about Zach. But if I had more time, I would have asked him way more questions. But like for what I got from him in the time that I had, I think it's going to make an amazing addition to the film. And the introduction he cut is hilarious. I've edited that, and I think I'm going to put that out as a little preview in a few days. That is going to become that. But to share a room with a man who you'd watched on like DVD special features and like met before, but like I've met him at conventions, but like those are open spaces where the whole point is to go and meet them. But like I got to make an appointment and meet one of my filmmaking heroes and kind of feel like, oh my God, I'm actually, when you get to stand and take a picture in the office of the man who created the Toxic Avenger at like 22 years old, it does give you this feeling of, maybe I'm doing a little bit better than I thought I've been doing. Maybe I'm actually making this happen. And that was a big moment for me, like as an artist, to get that moment with Lloyd. And that's something I'm going to treasure forever. So that's a good moment for me.
Yeah, that's almost like I don't used to, but I still bring up the idea of a career-defining moment in your career. And so meeting someone like him at the stage where you are now, where it's essentially still, I don't want to say it's like post-college, and you're post-college, and for the most part, you're just essentially figuring out where to go next, especially as a filmmaker. So meeting a filmmaker that you admired, especially when you were a kid, to where you are now, that's a lot of a great what's the term? That's a great step into your mindset of being a filmmaker now, because one of my favorite filmmakers growing up was Robert Rodriguez, and
bang.
And because I love watching his stuff. I love the fact that his stuff is like he can literally do everything by himself. I must have watched like Desperado and Once Upon a Time in Mexico like countless times. It was weird watching Spy Kids and then going back to Desperado. I'm like, this is the same guy. And then watching Spy Kids and then seeing Sharkboy and Longo, I was like, oh yeah, this is the same guy. And then watching Sin City, I'm like, it's like Robert Rodriguez has a very interesting, vast career in terms of, not only does he do like quote unquote exploitation style films, but at the same time, he's having fun with those type of films. They're very interesting to watch. And with someone like Lloyd Kaufman, his work spans at least 40 or so years now, give or take, since the late 70s. So I want to say
influenced so much.
Yeah,
so much.
And not only that, it has given filmmakers a chance to actually like springboard their work. James Gunn got his start at a Troma film, which was Romeo and Juliet.
Trey Parker and Matt Stone, they did Cannibal the Musical, which Troma distributed, which is incredible. If you've never seen Cannibal the Musical, give it a watch. That is 5-star cinema, my friend.
Especially if you listen to commentary and know that practically drunk watching the movie. So,
oh God, the commentary track for for Cannibal the Musical is one of the greatest things you will ever listen to, because they actually just, that's what they do. They get drunk and they watch the movie. It's fantastic.
Oh, I was about to say, it's like I was wondering, like, when the lights will come on in your thing, because you were like, "Doc, it's ending," and I'm just like, I wonder how much longer the lights will come mysteriously on. It was like,
My
I'm waiting.
apologies.
No
When I
problem.
started, it was lighter. When I started, it was lighter out. So by all means, go ahead.
Yeah, that's the wonder of fall, summertime lighting,
Transitions.
which is like, oh, like 2 months ago, 7:30, it would have been sunny as anything out now, but now it's just like going more darker now. So
Exactly.
yeah. How did you actually? Now you mentioned wrestling before. Were you a big fan into growing up in wrestling? It's like, did you watch like WWF, WCW, ECW, NWA, TNA, stuff like that?
Okay. Wow. Well, I was born in 1997, so I missed a lot of the Attitude Era. So I couldn't have seen that. I got into wrestling in the year 2007. My first pay-per-view was SummerSlam 2007, and I was brought up on primarily the Ruthless Aggression era. My primary favorites when I was a kid were The Undertaker, were Jeff Hardy, were definitely Matt Hardy, loved him too, Batista, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Edge, Randy Orton, all those guys who are now being touted as nostalgia acts, which makes me feel old already, even at the age of 22, which I hate that saying. I'm not old, I'm only 22, but I feel the oldest I've ever been, because an entire cycle is gone where now these guys are being touted as the nostalgia act. So I'm like, wow.
Believe me, I'm 34.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, I feel like the millennial guy already, just like I would hear. I always have this great joke about a few years ago. I was walking, and I've told this joke before on the podcast, but I'll tell it again because, as a millennial, they like to hear themselves talk. So, a couple of years ago, a few years ago, I was walking. I was in my college, and I was walking down the hall. I was about to leave the college, and in the corner of my ear and back of my ear, but behind me, as I'm leaving, I hear these two kids go, "Hey, do you remember Adam Levine?" And I hear that, and suddenly I just become like, am I gotten to the point where I'm just like, I'm old? People like these kids don't know who Adam Levine is. I'm just like, I'm old now. So yeah, it's odd how people who are supposedly, people who are like younger, all that stuff, and like everyone's like encompassed into a demographic, and people who were brought up in, say, the whole nostalgia act of the Attitude Era, it honestly feels different, compared to people who grew up with the ruthless aggression era, where it was basically the same thing.
Aggression.
Yeah, and it's basically the same thing as the Attitude Era, but at the same time, it was only played much more tamer, and then you literally get to the PG era, where it's just like, we need to be made mindful about who we're we're more towards the kids now, and the people who were growing up with the ruthless aggression era were like, where's the blood, where's the chair shots, all that stuff, and now it's like, oh, we can't have all that stuff now, and then so yeah, it's an odd placement to see fans who grew up in one era and fans who grew up in another era being heralded as like a nostalgia act. I'm pretty sure those who grew up in the 80s, like my brother, who watched like the old school WWF, Hogan, Macho Man, Mega Powers, Andre the Giant, Jake the Snake, Tito Santana, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, the Four Horsemen, WCW, WWF, where they didn't have like these feuds in the 90s. So yeah, it's an odd placement to hear. Essentially, this was an odd tangent, but this is but I'm sorry for going on a tangent about that. It's just
Oh, totally fine, man. It's your show.
Yeah, it's my show, but I'm trying to keep my standards like on more of a like more suitable. But yeah, how did you become back to wrestling though? So you grew up in the rebellion era, the ruthless aggression era. Was there any type of like stuff? Because I know during that era it was a lot more similar to the Attitude Era, but was there anything that was like sticking out to you in terms of like, I want to say like an influence to you, where it's like this type of like, because you mentioned like the Undertaker, and by that point the Undertaker had transitioned from the American Badass to, I believe, MMA Taker, which was essentially American Badass, but he was starting to become a lot more like mixed martial arts, where he was just like, employing like a triangle chokehold, that sort of thing. So in terms of like that sort of era, was there something of yours where you saw as an influence, especially growing older, especially?
Yes, honestly, I can, because like a thing I love about that, they brought this style of storytelling back, especially with the change in creative behind the scenes at WWE. Because I assume Bruce Pritchard, who's very active in the Ruthless Aggression era, who's very active now, his style of storytelling, and I genuinely enjoy it in wrestling when there's continuity, there's character development, there's interactions between, like Monday Night Raw, there'll be like an A story, a B story, a C story, a D story, and there'll be, but I love it when like a character from the A story will like bump into a character from story C, a character from story C will pop into someone from story D, someone from story D can bump into someone from story 7, like story E. There's endless possibilities in the world of wrestling. Like I love the kind of
Hang on for a second.
gimmicks. Like I adored the Undertaker.
Hang on for a second. Yeah, I'm pausing it for. Okay, I'm sorry,
Cool.
folks. Sorry, folks. Technical difficulties working with Zoom. As much as I don't want to be on Zoom, as much as I want to be actually on locations. COVID is kind of forcing me to stay home. So, continue.
All good, sir. No, I love that style of professional wrestling of high concept storytelling and build up, resolution, like twists and turns. Like so, that has definitely influenced my style in terms of the kind of stuff that I like. And you can see I love the vignettes and the promos and like the edited hype videos from the 2000s. And you can see a little bit of that in the Rise and Fall Blackcraft Wrestling. There's a montage at the end of the movie with a song cover of "In the Pines," the Lead Belly song that my friend Fred wrote, that my friend covered for me, and it's on SoundCloud. It's on SoundCloud, and incredibly well done. And I cut it very much like how WWE would do like a montage back in the 2000s. So I take direct influence from that.
Okay. So now that you mentioned it, and how, so Blackcraft Wrestling, how did you come about in making a documentary about that? Because those who don't know, Blackcraft Wrestling was, I believe, I might be wrong, but was a West Coast promotion that was sort of in the style of, I want to say like Lucha Underground, where it has a very cinematic feel, where they bring in characters, they bring in storylines, they have like actors playing these characters.
Yes.
They actually have, and one of the actors is Doug Bradley, who horror fans know as being Pinhead. So how did you come about into creating this documentary, The Rise and Fall of Blackcraft Wrestling?
Waiting to tell this story. Okay, so
I can see it.
April 2020. I am sitting at home. I am bored because COVID has hit. Quarantine, and I am losing it because this was the early days of this, where you couldn't do anything. Everything was closed. Not a thing open. So I'm at home. I want to work on the Zach Amico documentary, but I only have his stand-up set and some B-roll. So I really can't do anything yet aside from maybe some effects tests and a trailer. And I've done that. So I got nothing right now. So I go on Twitter, And I noticed that I had been a fan of the product, and I had seen that the WrestleMania show was a disaster, to put it mildly, and I saw that it completely KO'd the company. And I was sad because, I like those guys. Shame to see it end. And I followed some of the wrestlers from the promotion, and it became a running joke in the wrestling community the past year or so, even a year after the event. Wow, this thing was a disaster. Oh my God. And like, it always came up in jokes, and because it primarily, one of the influences was because it filled an entire segment on Botchamania because of just how insanely ill-timed this show was. And I noticed that this had a lot of traction, like a lot of people were talking about it. And I noticed that a lot of people were always kind of making jokes about, like, man, what's the story behind this thing? How did this happen? What was the creative behind this? And I made a joke. Someone was tweeting about, hey, I miss Blackcraft wrestling, whatever happened. And I tweeted this joke to them on a lark, on a laugh, where I said, yeah, I've been meaning to make the rise and fall Blackcraft wrestling. It was a joke because I'd actually tooled the idea around, like, how would I even do that? How would I even do that? Because I live like nowhere these people who made this thing. But then, out of nowhere, because I think he was already commenting on this feed, Matthew Justice, the final Blackcraft Wrestling heavyweight champion and a great indie tough guy deathmatch, like legit bad boy wrestler, he gives me the little eye glance emoji where that he's interested. And me, kind of again going back to Kevin Smith pushing whimsy, I hit him up and I was like, can I hit you up? He follows me. I send him a message and I'm like, hey, could you help me do this? And he's like, if you're serious about doing it, I could give you some people to call and contacts for them. Oh, and wow. I was like, you know what? I am doing nothing right now. I am bored. I need to work. 2 weeks. I'm on 2 weeks leave from my job anyway, because like I want to be safe because this thing was at its peak.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I need something. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go for it. At the very least, I'll have some interviews. So I got these interviews. He gets me a Brandon Lombardo, who was one of the key creative figures behind the company. No. Here's what happened. He got me Zicky Dice's. He got me Zicky Dice. He got me G Raver. Were tremendous performers. You have Zicky Dice, who is the current NWA TV champion over on NWA Power when that comes back, and G Raver, who is a child's nightmare, a deathmatch wrestler, a cool human being, has some of the coolest merch out there, sick looking human being. And he also just won a legal battle against Jim Cornette over a t-shirt. So good for G Raver. And Zicky Dice put me in contact with Brandon Lombardo, who gave me essentially, not only gave me an interview with him, but gave me the keys to the kingdom. He sent me whole copies for shows, pictures, assets, like old graphics, match cards, behind the scenes B-roll. And wow. I had the keys to the kingdom open to me. And I was like, oh my God, I have to do this now. So yeah. And then I get in touch with interview Soraya Knight, who many might know as Paige's mom. That was really interesting. And then so I got all the interviews in. I did a lot that which was a time and a half, but I got them all. It was a lot of nights and a lot of whiskey, a lot of trying to get Zoom to work in my basement, but I got them all, and I started writing a format. And I edited a trailer together because I was like, I should probably have something out for this. So I edited a quick trailer, put that out on YouTube, put that out on my Twitter. It got a lot of hits. And one of the people who ended up retweeting it, because I tagged them as a joke, because everything starts that way with me.
Yeah.
The whole pushing whimsy thing. And I tag Matthew from Botchamania. And
really?
Not only does he retweet it, he follows me on Twitter, and I shoot him a message, and I was like, "Hey, man, love your work. Thank you for the follow." He said, thanks, mate. Looking forward to the film. And that blew my mind. So again, another big high mark for me was getting that dude's seal of approval. But then I remember the film was basically underway. I had a big chunk of it done, and I was like, I could probably release this by the end of July. But then I thought to myself, you have his contact. You could try and get him to be in it. And I was like, you know what? If I can get Lloyd Kaufman, I can get Matthew from Botchamania. So I sent him a DM where I was like, hey, listen, you're a busy man. You got a million things going on. You got to produce episodes every week. But if you have 30 to 45 minutes, because I was only really going to ask him about the No Apologies show that he covered on his episode. And I was like, if you'd like to, I could send you questions, you could answer them, and I could splice them into the movie as your own little segments. And then later that day, he gets back to me and he's like, I would love to. Send me the questions. I was like, I got him. So you will see Matthew from Botchamania in the No Apology segment of the Rise and Fall of Blackcraft Wrestling. And I will put it like this. The film as a whole, I am so proud of, but the sequences within the No Apology... Let me put it to you like this. The film, without the No Apology segment, would probably be only about 35 to 40 minutes. The No Apology segment bumped this thing up to an hour because there was... Yeah. And dude, I'm going to tell you, there was so much more. There is so much more that I could have put into this, and I wanted to put into this. But this movie would have been 3 hours long. No Apologies, the story behind it, the creative flummoxes, the botched deliveries, the cut time, everything. To spoil what these people have to say about it would be a disservice, I feel, to this part. But I can tease one thing for you. By the time this comes out, actually, you know what? I will just tell you because this is going to come out after it's come out. So
yeah.
For those who know or don't know, the two big what the hell moments from this show are as follows: a man being legitimately crucified on stage to a neon crucifix, and Doug Bradley, the preacher, getting his throat slit on stage by Matthew Justice, which starts spurting blood. Now, that is insane. Apparently, that was not always the original. Apparently, that was not the original idea. Apparently, the original idea was even more insane. Apparently, the original concept was PCO was going to have an open challenge, and who would answer that challenge? None other than New Jack. My God. Yes. And then, not only that, they were going to have a match where PCO would, of course, no-sell everything New Jack did, which would piss him off. New Jack would then whip out a pistol and say, "This ain't fake, mother..." And he would shoot PCO in the chest. He would start spurting blood, but then he would no-sell it because he's not human, give him the tombstone, and pin him. This was, and it's probably a good thing that didn't happen, because you don't want to do a fake shooting at a wrestling show, but I am disappointed because it would have been the greatest thing ever. You asked earlier.
I have one thought. First off, that would have been amazing, sans the shooting. They could have worked around the shooting and just have it as a fireball, because fireballs are just no one really knows. No one, when someone takes a fireball in wrestling, you can't unsell it. So someone like PCO gets a fireball into the face, that just makes him more mad. It's like, now you're going to piss him off. Because my brother actually seen him actually work the Ring of Honor show, Super Japan show, and he said he saw him literally do a Canadian Destroyer, flipping around all the rings. So yeah, but to hear him and New Jack to fight a match, and him no selling, not even being phased by New Jack's, gimmick of New Jackness, that would have been amazing to see. But to top it off with a fixed shooting, what the hell?
Oh yeah, no, dude, that's the tip of the iceberg, man. There was so much, and honestly, I was editing this. You understand, like by the time of this recording, it is Tuesday, September 8th. It premieres tomorrow on Wednesday night at 7:00, and I was editing it up until this morning. Really, I was putting the final touches on it, and I had it's a fun little bit at the end there that I'm very happy with. There's the montage with my friend's original song, with my friend's cover song, and
editor's work is never done.
An editor's work is never done, sir. And
yes, I know that firsthand.
Firsthand, sir. Mm-hmm. It is honestly, unless I can top myself with the Zach Amico documentary and another project I have possibly slated for 2021. This has been the best thing I've done, and that's not to put down a lot of the work I do with Catalyst Wrestling, which I am by and large very proud of and very impressed with myself for doing. Because over there, I have had a great team to work with. They are a big proponent of just throwing you into the fire and seeing how you do, and that has been Catalyst Wrestling was boot camp for me, man. That really took me up a notch. But that I'm looking forward to. It's my best work yet. I think everybody's. It's getting big responses on social media. It's some of the biggest of my career so far. I've cracked like 600 followers because of this. I'm getting numbers. I'm getting eyes on myself. So yeah, right now I'm sitting. But for me, it is, and I am so excited. I hope. Hey, by the time this airs, if you've seen it, if you liked it, great. If you didn't, you still gave me a view, so thank you. And I look forward to it. So that's Rise and Fall of Blackcraft Wrestling was quite the journey that took me through the project that kept me sane during COVID-19.
I do have a quick question about that. Did you at all happen to get Doug Bradley for your documentary, or was he unavailable because we didn't have the
sadly unfortunately, so for those who don't know, I mentioned before, Doug Bradley, the actor, the thespian who portrays Pinhead in the House, played a character in Blackcraft Wrestling known as the Preacher, and it was Doug Bradley in the universe. It was the actor Doug Bradley just playing this character, just getting into it, and it's so weird, but he brings his A game to it, and I was like, I want to make this happen. So I really tried, but I do not have the connections for this. I tried to look through his website, maybe find like a book me link or like find something so I could email him a contact somewhere. Couldn't find it, but you know what? I dedicated an entire short segment to outlining who he was in the doc. There is enough footage of him doing his work to see he's there in spirit. I wish I could have gotten him for it because Doug Bradley is a tremendous talent, but I wanted to get PCO for it as well. I wanted to get PCO. I DM'd him. I hit him up on Facebook and Twitter. He did not get back to me. So PCO, you're awesome. I wanted you in my movie, but c'est la vie, did not happen. So.
All right. You mentioned Catalyst Wrestling before. Catalyst Wrestling was also. It was also called Capital Wrestling before the name changed.
Capital Wrestling.
How did you get in touch with becoming a?
Right.
So you were talking about before the show. You were talking about how you're the editor, production guy, associate producer. It's like you wrangle a lot of hats.
I do. It is Catalyst Wrestling has brought out, and they will not be offended by me saying this, but it has brought out the best and worst for me, and I'm very thankful for both of it because it has taught me to be tougher. It has shown me a real look at what high-end production is like on a weekly television show. People give Raw and SmackDown shit every week for being 2 or 3 hours. People got to sit down, format, write, and edit that show, man. Live. Yeah. We have to do 24 to 30 minutes of TV almost every week. And that is a challenge sometimes. Yeah. We are building this from the ground up. So how I get into it, I love the story. So I love telling it. So the story of me getting into Capital, then Catalyst Wrestling, is my story of getting into independent wrestling. I attended a House of Glory wrestling show in 2015 with one of my friends, Matthew Koffler, fellow filmmaker. We saw this show, which was low budget in an Elks Lodge that smelled funny. The ropes were weird, but it was some of the most fun we'd ever had at a show. And from that point on, House of Glory, just independent wrestling all over the state, even if it was I'm in college, was going to independent wrestling shows. And along the way, I met someone named Matt Ryan, who at the time was portraying a character named Matthew Ryan Shapiro at House of Glory. And along the way, I had bumped into him at the Barclays Center for some WWE events. I did an interview with him for, once again, the General Admission Wrestling podcast way back in the day. And me and him struck up a mild friendship, and I was getting into contact with him more and more. I did like some flyer work for him. He comped me a ticket or two for a show he did before Capital Wrestling called Future Is Now, which only lasted the one show, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had a great time with it, and it made me, wow, this guy kind of has his head on straight and he knows what he's doing. Has a good sense of business. Matt Ryan is one of my absolute favorite human beings. And he then announces this project, Capital Wrestling. He announces it what struck me was just how different it seemed. And just, he was going back, him and the person he was working with at the time they had built it very much to be a throwback to old school Memphis style NWA Mid-South Memphis wrestling with modern wrestlers. And the original show took place in this gorgeous church, Cathedral Hall, and it was freezing. It was the winter, but I still had a great time with it. There was a barbecue stand. It was so different. And they were producing it for online TV. It was a TV show. And along the way, and I had such a great time with that first show. It is still a favorite of mine. A few weeks later, he posts on Facebook, I am looking for interns and assistants to help me out with this. And I am sophomore year of college. I have nothing going on. I have a job that gives me money, but I'm not really doing anything in my line of work. And so I'm at that age where I'm like, gotta find something. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this. So I get in, I DM him, and I sign my name on the deal. And I'm like, metaphorically speaking, from that point on, I was off to the races. So I went from finding bars and restaurants to do flyering and advertising in, but I also found I started like uploading to YouTube and editing clips and doing social media live during shows. I was getting a real boot camp experience, and I learned a lot from the people who work there. And along the way, there have been challenges and complications and developments, like none of which I really need to get into here, but it really has shown me the ups and downs of working in the entertainment industry. And I've met some amazing people through it. I've met amazing talent through it. And I eventually, when our editor for the first 100 plus episodes of Capital Wrestling were edited by a man named Zane Decker, who I believe works for Ring of Honor currently. And an amazing talent, so good. And I admired his style. And eventually he got signed. And we had to rebuild our production team from the ground up. And Matt turned to me and he said, hey, could you handle TV going forward, the assembly of it? We have another talented gentleman named Dean Silverberg who edits the matches together. That dude is a Ronin. He does such a good job with it. And I began the final assembly and export of television. And for the past almost 60 weeks now, almost a year plus, I have been editing and reformatting television for Catalyst Wrestling. And I have been a big part of a lot of the visuals, visual redevelopment, branding. A lot of artistic decisions have fallen on me, and I've gotten to edit whole vignettes and segments. I've gotten to direct segments, shoot tape, film ringside. So I keep saying boot camp over and over again, but it really has just been that. And I get to work with great people. My friend Raymond Sanchez, Stephen James, Heritage Jania, and my Stephanie Satilia, who you spoke to last week, who was ridiculously goddamn hilarious. And Portia Vaughn is a genius character. I love being Portia's assistant on screen.
Yeah.
If nobody knows, I am also intern Ben, or the boy. I wear a pink hat. It's terrible. No, it's terrible. It's amazing at the same time, because I've actually gotten chants from the audience who like, be a man, leave her, and like other people like, free Ben, free Ben.
Ben.
Free Ben. It was incredible. And I got chance at a wrestling show, and you have never known. Me and her got to do a segment at the Skankfest Comedy Festival last year.
She actually talked about that. Yeah, she talked about it, not in whole, but
to have 300 people boo you out of the now unfortunately closed Brooklyn Bazaar, may it rest in peace. Oh my God. We went out there. She was yelling at me. I had to set up to have to like be mentally ready to be in front of like almost 300 people crammed into a room who are booing you. And oh my God, it was all for her, because she's a master at getting people to like hate her in this character, which she plays perfectly. But I'm there selling it like, what the hell is she even talking about? These people hate us. That is an all-time top 10 memory for me. Matt Ryan, Stephanie Satilli, Harry Turjanian, Stephen James, like Lee Mandan, of course. He goes by Ash Samuels, indie wrestler turned producer. He's a great human being, and I've gotten to work with a lot of interesting people. And Catalyst Wrestling, I am comfortable saying, has made me a better artist, a better businessman, a better producer, and I owe so much in my career to it right now. I don't think I would be doing what I am currently if it wasn't for Capital and Catalyst Wrestling. I don't think I would be.
Now you mentioned 60 weeks, so that's like close to hang on. Oh, that's over a year, because I have to remember. If I ever need to remember how many weeks are in a year, I just need to remember DC Comics 52. It's like, I gotta just remember DC Comics did a storyline for an entire year, and they called it 52.
52.
So I was like, if I need to remember how many weeks are in a year, just to go like, how many weeks are in a year? 52. Okay. And but although it's weird being a theater kid, and it's like, how could you not know how many weeks are in a year by Rent? And I'm just like, well, I don't. I'm not a theater kid. I'm part of the theater, but I'm not a theater kid. So I'm not like musically inclined. Okay, the only musicals I know of that I really enjoy are like Little Shop of Horrors and a couple of them. But I'm just like, I'm not really in depth with musicals, so. I'm more like the film person. So if you ask me about film, I'm just like, well, you just open up Pandora's box, so yeah. But for working over a year with Capital Wrestling / Catalyst Wrestling, especially going forward because of COVID, and being unable to essentially produce weekly news shows since March or so, how were you able to essentially combat producing a weekly television show, especially for wrestling? Were you in charge of essentially creating vignettes, like because NWA, when they had Power, they were going to do Power more, and then COVID happened. So, and then for like a month or two, and then for a month or two, like for a couple of months, they started doing like Carneyland, which was basically, a couple of months of like the wrestlers doing stuff, skits, stuff like that. They were trying to copy, I think, Being the Elite, that sort of thing too. And even then, Being the Elite, they even had like a month or two storylines with Matt and Nick Jackson were basically fighting in their backyard, and they basically had like a backyard federation, a backyard wrestling thing for at least for a month and a half, just to keep people entertained and having because of COVID restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
But because of COVID restrictions, how was your back to my question was like, how did the process of producing a weekly television show, especially for wrestling, change since March, where everything literally was shut down?
Okay, so in order to properly do this, I'm going to bring up the Catalyst Wrestling archive that I have here, just so I can kind of timetable where this transition was, because when COVID hit, we were in the process of our rebranding.
Yeah, which was
We
Callous.
had, which was now Catalyst Wrestling. This is an odyssey, to say the least. So we had our final Capital Wrestling taping in February, early
Yeah,
March. It was called Stand Clear. Great show. And we filmed some amazing matches, and those lasted us at least I want to get this right because I have it right here. We filmed an entire night's worth of matches, and those took us about from the end of February through March into like the first week of April. And after that, we officially rebranded as Catalyst Wrestling. The matches we had ran out around the end of April. And so from that point on, we had officially reformatted, rebranded. We began putting out old matches, kind of reformatted to the new company branding, and the television show became a storyline recap of everything that had been going on in the company thus far. We did an episode recapping the journey of Colby Carino. We did an episode recapping the feud between Anthony Gangone and Harry Turjanian. We did an episode recapping all the major moments of the Catalyst Wrestling Championship.
yeah,
We had an entire episode dedicated to the Hudson County Horror Show and Zach Amico. We had a segment dedicated to Portia Vaughn. We had a segment dedicated to the Rep and their feud with Hot Boys International. Casey Navarro, Lucky 13, Eric Martin, Wrecking Bolagursky, Bobby Orlando. Bobby Orlando is ridiculously talented. He has a stuffed goat and it's genius. We did a whole episode called Bobby Orlando's Birthday Bash, which was great. Loved it. So proud of that. But we had gone from we still aired matches, but archived matches, obviously.
yeah.
And that was basically the routine for a couple months there in quarantine. And we had until they could lock down some way to do wrestling. And very recently, I can't go into all the specifics because I don't think that's the information on my end to give out. But
Yeah.
we very recently secured a location. We had the proper measures put in place to ensure everyone's health. And we have filmed an entire new crop of matches, not all on the same day. Some of them filmed off-site by other producers in our company. Dean Silverberg has been back on the editing again. Eddie Arocho, Andrew Fumey, Danny Walsh, all these amazing people who have been our director, Jesse Holland, have been crushing it, like getting these great matches with the likes of Homicide, who's been a big part of the product. Colby Carino, of course, we filmed a lot of matches. I can't really give out the specifics of which yet because like some have not aired. The only one that has aired at the time. I can tell you what I can tell you what we have aired and what has been confirmed. We are doing a gimmick at this time called CDAO or SIDAO. Yeah. I've heard it both ways. We have found Catalyst Wrestling is on a private island
that's supposedly owned by Antonio Inoki. So yeah,
that was in one of the original bits we did to hype it up. The hype videos we did, but we have that. We just aired the first round of a $20,000 tournament sponsored by the folks at Future Legend, and we have a first round matchup right now between Freestyle Champion Ghost Shadow and Black Zemus. Quality lucha style matchup, and we also have a great panel with Emilio Sparks and HC Loke. And Dave Lee from Dave Knows Wrestling. And we have a nice format going right now. And next week on the show, well, by the time this comes out, it will be long out. But like on the next episode, it's going to be Anthony Gangone, who I mentioned before, who's going to be taking on Zach Amico's client, the Meadowlands Monster. And some footage of that will definitely be appearing in the Jersey Devil Reject Zach Amico. A nice little crossover between one of my previous subjects and my current subject. So that's a lot of fun. But
that's actually awesome. But yeah, it's weird how essentially because it's weird because not many for a lot of people who really don't know who just watch wrestling as a mainstream like WWE and AEW. A lot of these other federations, the small independent federations, independent federations in general, they are struggling because of COVID restrictions, and not many places can do wrestling, and they have to find a place and a time where essentially a lot of these places can be okayed. yeah, okayed or at least, stamp of approval. I know Joey Janela's Spring Break or Joey Janela's like federation or at least promotion, something like that. He recently,
GCW.
yeah, GCW recently did some shows on a boardwalk, and they called it, I think, Bring Your Suntan, or I mean, Wear Your Sunscreen Lotion, something like that. So yeah, but when you're watching it from a mainstream point of view, it's because Florida at the time they said it was okay because Florida really is home of spring training, stuff like that too. So Florida has much more of a sports background as opposed to just like, oh, it's because a lot of this stuff. As I said before, wrestling has a very dark and seedy underbelly. So yeah, I feel like that's a different conversation altogether. And this is more about your production stuff. But yeah, I can't wait to actually start seeing more of the stuff going forward, especially since for the past couple of months I've been actually recapping Catalyst Wrestling for you guys to make sure it's like, hey,
You have some matches to look forward to, sir. That is a lot of wonderful content on the horizon. We are back in motion. We are back at full speed. We are going forward with production. We have built up an amazing production staff who's we're all bringing some great things to the table, myself included. And yeah, like Matt Ryan and Ash Samuels running the show, Harry Trajanian and Stephen James on commentary, the great managers like Stephanie Satilli, Zach Amico, like guys and gals like that going forward. So we have a lot of really choice, very well produced content coming your way very soon. So be on the lookout for that. Catalyst Wrestling on Facebook and Twitter. Check that out. YouTube as well. We're on Fight. We're on Gas Digital. We're on the Fight Network, working on a couple of deals at the moment. We're putting a lot of very interesting deals together. So you look forward to that on the horizon. So Catalyst Wrestling, nowhere to go but up.
And speaking of social media, it's about that time where I start wrapping up my show because I feel like we've talked a lot about your work with production. I feel like we touched base on a lot of stuff, and we've talked to almost about an hour and 10 minutes and some change. So that's like long for my show. So I try to keep my shows like at least under an hour, over an hour. But as when you go over, like when we go over an hour, that's a good show. But
I like to talk.
Yeah, Stephanie's episode is probably gonna be like an hour and like maybe 25 minutes or so. So
she beat me. By like 12 minutes. So I'm not going to take 12 minutes. I'm not going to take 12 minutes just to sprice out the show just as a FU to her. But no, I'll. So is this where I give my plugs or what?
Yeah. So I do have 3 questions left. They're pretty straightforward. To those who are watching or listening right now, to my audience members, do you have any advice to those who are essentially struggling with production means, especially since they're trying to figure out how to essentially make something during a quarantine time where a lot of this stuff has been locked down, especially, and there are only certain places open?
Okay, it's so weird you ask me that because I don't even know if I'm the guy to ask. I am a dude who's lucky enough to have a camera, good friends, a good support system, and enough chemical imbalance in his brain to make things that some people find entertaining. I know my self-worth. I know that I'm on a good path, but it's not always easy for me to see that. But if I had to give advice to anyone listening, keep going. There is always a way. There was a horror film recently called Host. It is a horror film done completely on Zoom. I did my documentary through Zoom. I got my interviews that way. That things are opening up a little bit. Social distance style filming, like write a story to capitalize on this. If you have a story to tell, it's like, I don't have enough money. Okay, you can't afford a camera. No, you have a camera. It's called a phone. You can use that. Everyone has one now. Like Joe Bob Briggs on the last drive-in gave this amazing speech about being a filmmaker, and I'm gonna quote it a little bit verbatim because it really inspired me. You have a phone. I can't go to film school. Okay, you can go on YouTube and find thousands and thousands of hours of tutorials on how to color, on how to collect color, how to edit, how to use Premiere Pro, how to use Final Cut.
Yeah.
don't have screenwriting software. Who said a screenplay had to look perfect?
Yeah.
Get out Microsoft Word, get out Apple Pages, open a Google Doc. Who cares if it doesn't look, write a script, even if it's not greatly formatted, because it has to make sense to you. I don't have a crew. Okay, I can't afford a crew. Get your friends, pay them in booze and hamburgers. That's payment too, man. You know what? As long as you're giving them something and you can give them just a little bit, they'll show that you care. And you're thanking them for doing this. So you know what? People will work, man. They want to. Just find the people that'll ride or die you on that. Treat it like you want this. And I've wanted this for a while. It's like I did for a long time. I didn't think anybody was ever going to notice what I was doing. And now I have something that's going to get a couple hundred eyes on it, hopefully tomorrow night at the time of this recording.
Yeah.
If a guy like me can do this, I don't care if you're a guy, a girl, you're trans, you're black, you're whatever. Like, if you have a story worth telling, the means to tell it, and something you want to put out there, do it. Because at the end of the day, I wanted a documentary about Anthony Gangone because I would want to watch one. So I made it because no one else was probably gonna for a while. I wanted a documentary called The Rise and Fall of Blackcraft Wrestling. No one else was gonna make one. I had to make that on my own, and I did it, and it's coming out tomorrow. I want a documentary about Zach Amico because he's cool. No one else seems to be making one. I'm going to fucking make it because that's what I'm going to do. So at the end of the day, you just got to look at what you're doing and just say, it gets hard. There are moments you're going to want to quit. You don't know a certain thing. You got to watch tutorials. You got to get an effect to work. It's not working. Push through, go to bed, get up in the morning, hit it harder, try it again. No more excuses. Because that's how art dies, when people just give up. I'm not saying you can't take a break, walk away from it, take a walk, take a dump, go get a meal, go do something, get your head straight and get back in there, look at it from a different angle. You fix it until it's perfect. And you know what? The first thing you make is probably going to be garbage. It's probably going to be dog shit. But you know what? The next thing you make is going to be a little less dog shit. The next thing after that, and the next thing after that. And you just get better every single time. And I like to think that that's what I've been doing for the past 5 years. I didn't get into this plan to be a filmmaker. It's just something that happened.
And with that, I think that's a good good topic to add drop off. But do you have any like social media things you want to plug?
Yes, sir. You can follow me on. I keep my Facebook fairly personal just because it's where I communicate with friends on a more social level. But I do a lot of my business through there. So. Benjamin Falbo on Facebook. Find me there. If you just make yourself clear that you're approaching me in a professional client capacity. If friendships emerge from that, wonderful. If they don't, happy to work with you. Twitter is where I've been doing a lot of my promotional work. You can find me at Falbo_Benjamin. That is FALBO_BENJAMIN. You can find me there. Doing a lot of my promotion for Blackcraft Wrestling, the documentary there. I am on Instagram. That is just Falbo Benjamin. I typically just use that again for social reasons, but it has proved to be a tool for promotion in the past. So you'll see me active there as well. The big golden egg right now is my YouTube. That's where I'm going to be putting a lot of my stuff. You can just find me, Benjamin Falbo on YouTube. You can find me there. That once again, that's BENJAMINFALBO. That is Benjamin Falbo on YouTube. You can find a lot of my recent work. There's some stuff from college left up there that I'm debating getting rid of, but you know what? I still have a fondness for it. So take a look. If you want to talk about my artistic progression, take a look at that, kids. It's a lot of fun. But
even my college work is like, should I delete my old college stuff from my own? You know what? On my personal channel, it's my personal thing. So it's like
it's my personal thing. I've done nothing problematic. So like, I have no reason or impetus to get rid of any of it. But like, no, that's my YouTube is where a lot of my content's going to be lying. Thank you for having me on the show. Additionally, there is one other thing I can plug. I do my own podcast on the side as well. It is called the It Came from Queens podcast. It's what I like to describe as Joe Rogan meets kind of like a midnight horror host, where I talk to people about like their goals, their dreams, their fears. We talk about like off the beaten path creatives. And that has been a hell of a lot of fun. I did an interview with Josh Stifter, the director of Greywood's Plot, Nick Spears, a YouTuber. Stephanie Satilia has been a recurring guest. We talked about the Sonic movie. That was a lot of fun. So check that out. It Came from Queens. It's on iTunes. But to finally let this wrap, thank you very much for having me on.
Of course. And everyone else, I hope you had a great time listening. And yeah, just stay safe and be well.